Over the course of the long history of the Republic, there were trillions of soldiers who fought and died to defend the Republic against its enemies, from Sith empires to separatists. But in all these trillions of soldiers, there were some who grew disillusioned with the Republic and ultimately decided to jump ship. These traitors all made their choices for different reasons, some good and some not. And in this video, we're going to be looking at some of the most significant traitors in the Republic's history, from its ancient conflicts to the Clone Wars. Before we wrap up, a huge thank you to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Don't miss out. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to download the game now. Use the code HelloJAN to unlock 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstones, but act fast. This exclusive offer is only available until February 1st. Build your team, strategize, and jump into the action today. Before we get into things, there's a few ground rules we'd like to lay down first. Of all those who betrayed the Republic and sided with its enemies over the course of its history, a great many of them were Jedi, and were often drawn to the dark side and thus compelled to betray the Republic for the many Sith empires that threatened it over the years. We won't be discussing any of these cases today. We're specifically going to be looking at beings who betrayed the Republic, not because they were compelled to by the dark side, but of their own free will. We're looking to understand why these beings made the choices they did, and it wouldn't be terribly interesting to just have the answer be dark side over and over again. Additionally, we're not going to be talking about every single individual to ever betray the Republic. We're looking at a selection of those whose betrayals had an impact or whose motivations deserve special focus. In cases where the Republic had a lot of traitors making the same choice for similar reasons, such as clones deserting during the Clone Wars or Sith defectors joining Revan during the Jedi Civil War, we're only going to be picking one or two especially prominent examples. With all that out of the way, let's begin. Our first traitor was a man who lived nearly 11,000 years before the Clone Wars, a Republic admiral by the name of Purs Praetor. The vast majority of you have probably never heard of this man, but of all the traitors we'll be discussing today, he was by far the most historically significant. He also has the distinction of being one of the only ones on this list whose actions were unambiguously righteous. History actually remembered him as a hero, and it was correct to do so. Purs Praetor joined the Republic military sometime around 11,000 BBY, and he joined at a dark time in Republic history. This was the height of the Pius Dea Crusades, a stretch of 1,000 years in which the Republic was controlled by a fanatical anti-alien cult, the Pius Dea, which unleashed vicious crusades upon the Republic's non-human neighbors and brutal inquisitions upon its own people. Things were so bad that the Jedi renounced the Republic during this period, declaring themselves no longer subject to Republic law and covertly supporting knights errant who went out to fight the Crusaders. The Pius Dea was nothing short of monstrous, but after 1,000 years in power, it had firm control over the Republic and most of its institutions. Its power bolstered by the blind adherence of countless Pius Dea devotees spread across the galaxy. One of these Pius Dea-controlled institutions was the Republic Navy, which the cult deployed against numerous civilizations in its 34 crusades, sending forth its sinister cathedral ships to deploy zealous crusaders to pillage and massacre. This was what the Republic Navy was like when Purs Praetor joined it, and he steadily rose through its ranks, eventually attaining the rank of admiral. Like all others within the Pius Dea-controlled military, Praetor was an adherent of the Pius Dea religion, at least originally. At the time Praetor served in the Navy, the Pius Dea's enemies, led by the Jedi, were finally beginning to organize against the cult, putting into motion plans they had been developing in secret for centuries with the goal of retaking control of the Republic. As part of this plot, they began to spread a secret heresy within the Pius Dea with the intent of causing a religious schism. These schismatics were known as the Renunciates, and their beliefs began to spread throughout the Republic Navy. Before long, the Renunciates had members in the highest echelons of Republic military power, and Admiral Praetor was one of them. In fact, Praetor was one of the ringleaders of the Renunciate conspiracy, working with the Jedi, the Kamasi, and all the rest to bring an end to the Crusades. Sometime in the 10,970s BBY, he discovered a planet that would become the Renunciate leadership's secret stronghold. The planet, Prefspelt 4, where groups of anti-Pius Dea refugees had established a secret colony. At their base on Prefspelt, Praedu and his co-conspirators plotted the downfall of the Pius Dea, which they brought to pass just a few days later. In 10,967 BBY, the Renunciates declared themselves and sparked a civil war within the Pius Dea. Thanks to Praedu's leadership, a majority of the Republic Navy defected to the Renunciate cause, and a year later, the Pius Dea faithful were utterly defeated in the Battle of Uquine. In the years that followed, as the Republic was rebuilt and the Pius Dea were purged from the government, Admiral Praedu met with other Renunciate officers on Prefspelt to oversee the rebuilding of the Republic Navy, establishing naval traditions that would persist for more than 10,000 years. In the end, Admiral Pers Praedu was remembered by history not as a traitor, but as the father of the Republic Navy, the man who had brought down the Pius Dea. Prefspelt 4 continued to host the Republic Naval Academy for millennia to come, and Praedu was buried on the Academy's grounds in the Naval Crypt. On the night before their graduation, Navy recruits would undertake a traditional walk from Castle Praedu to the Naval Crypt, where they would swear loyalty to the Republic Navy over the old Admiral's tomb. The story of Admiral Praedu shows just how subjective a concept treason really is. Praedu broke his oaths and waged war against the Republic he was sworn to serve, a traitor by any definition. But virtually nobody in later generations would think of him as one, and any Republic naval officer worth their uniform would deck you if you even implied as such. In any case, Pers Praedu was a hero, and his example shows that blind loyalty isn't everything, and that sometimes making the choice to turn traitor is a righteous act. That isn't always the case though, and our next traitor jumped ship for more questionable reasons. His name was Dorjanda Case, and he was a Jedi Master. Now, we said earlier that we weren't going to be talking about Jedi who fell to the dark side and joined the Sith, and that's still the case, because Dorjanda Case didn't jump ship because of the dark side, and he didn't betray the Republic for the Sith. He betrayed the Republic for the Mandalorians, and his reasons for doing so are fascinating. We're sure you know the story of the Mandalorian Wars by now. If not, you need to check out some of our other videos, but in 3965 BBY, after more than a decade of conquering non-Republic worlds and preparing for war, the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders invaded Republic space. The Republic was badly beaten in battle after battle, and the Mandalorians advanced toward the core worlds, dead set on toppling the Republic and conquering the galaxy. The Senate begged the Jedi for help, but the Jedi Council refused to get involved. However, two young Jedi Knights, Revan and Malak, disobeyed the orders of the Council, rallied a band of like-minded Jedi, and went to war on the Republic's behalf anyway. Many Jedi were sympathetic to Revan and his followers, but Dorjanda Case was not one of them. Case was a member of the Jedi Council, in fact, and he strongly opposed Jedi involvement in the Mandalorian Wars. He wasn't the only council member to hold such views, but he held them for much different reasons from his colleagues. Case was sympathetic to the Mandalorians. Dorjanda Case had previously fought for the Republic in the Great Sith War, in which the Mandalorian Crusaders fought on behalf of the Sith. Case had been captured by the Mandalorians during the conflict and held prisoner for the rest of the war, and while in captivity, he had fallen in love with one of his captors, a Mandalorian woman named Vada. Vada had taught Case the ways of the Mandalorians and even became pregnant by him, but while pregnant, she had been killed in a Republic bombing raid. Killed by a bomb launched by a Jedi, no less. Case was grief-stricken and especially hurt by the fact that she had been killed by a Jedi, as he believed she had deserved a fair fight and a worthy death in battle rather than having to contend with the power of the Force. Nonetheless, Case had returned to the Jedi after the end of the war, serving with distinction and earning a seat on the High Council. Despite his experiences, Case was loyal to the Jedi and believed in the Jedi ideal, but when the Mandalorian Wars began, his loyalties were somewhat divided. He urged the Council to stay out of the Mandalorian Wars, which made him deeply unpopular with the Senate, which was able to successfully pressure the Jedi Council to make Case step down. This, combined with the Council's reluctant sanctioning of Revan's crusade against the Mandalorians, drove Case to abandon the Jedi Order and go to war on the Mandalorians' behalf. Georgi and Case gathered a number of like-minded Jedi, much as Revan did, and they became the Mandalorian Knights. It should be noted that Case didn't do this only due to persistent attachment to his late Mandalorian lover. He had ideological reasons for making his choice as well. Case believed that the Republic was irreparably corrupt and that the Mandalorians would do a better job of ruling the galaxy. While the Mandalorians' actions during the war were often brutal, Case knew that the Mandalorians were highly adaptable and capable of great change, while he had come to believe that the Republic wasn't. In other words, while the Republic was highly resistant to reform and would likely remain corrupt in Case's view, the Mandalorians could be shaped into a force for good, even if they weren't one in the present. Case still believed in the Jedi way, but he believed that the Order had become too close to the Republic, as he believed they demonstrated when they caved to Senate pressure to remove him from the Council. Case believed that, instead of doing the Republic's bidding, they should have remained neutral and let whoever won the war on their own rule the galaxy. Then, once the Mandalorians inevitably toppled the Republic, the Jedi could influence them for the better, curbing their brutality and refining their ideology into something that the whole galaxy could benefit from, as the Jedi had tried to do with the Republic. It's a fascinating perspective, and while we don't agree with Case's analysis, he raised some interesting points, and his reasons for betraying the Republic are at least respectable. On top of all of this, Georgi and Case believed that the Mandalorians deserved a fair fight against the Republic without having to contend with the power of the Force, as he believed Vada had. When Revan and his Jedi Crusaders joined the fight, bringing the Force to bear in the Republic's favor, Case believed that the proper course to restore balance was to give the Mandalorians their own Jedi. Thus, he brought the Mandalorian Knights into being, and he and his followers began leading Mandalorian units into action on battlefronts all across the Republic. He and his followers received special sanction from Mandalore himself, who agreed to let Case build his own version of the Jedi Order and maintain rule of it after the war was won. To get started on raising a new generation of Mandalorian Knights, Georgi and Case attempted to kidnap a bunch of younglings from the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, but this plan fell through, and Case was ultimately captured by the Jedi. In his absence, the Mandalorian Knights disbanded, and Georgi Case was put on trial before the Senate. During his trial, he proclaimed the righteousness of his cause for 9 hours, refusing to renounce his support of the Mandalorians. Georgi Case is a fascinating character, and there really wasn't anyone else like him in all the history of the Star Wars galaxy. His choices are especially interesting when you consider that the Mandalorian Wars ultimately corrupted him a lot less than they corrupted Revan's followers. While the Revanchists were consumed by the dark side due to the horrors of the war, Case remained loyal to the ideal of the light side and the Jedi way, and though he became a bit more brutal as the war went on, he was able to stop himself from doing anything truly horrific, something that can't be said for a great many Revanchists. Georgi Case was a traitor to the Republic, and his loyalty to the Mandalorians was misguided, but he wasn't evil. Our next traitor definitely was, however. He also fought in the Mandalorian Wars, albeit on the side of the Republic. But when the Jedi Civil War began, when Revan and Malak, once the heroes of the Republic, became the Dark Lords of a new Sith Empire, he betrayed the Republic, becoming one of the Sith Empire's top officers. He was far from the only one to make that choice. A large portion of the Republic military defected during the Jedi Civil War, and for a simple reason. They were more loyal to Revan, to the hero who had saved them and their families from the Mandalorians, than they were to the Republic, or to those Jedi who had sat back and watched Republic forces be massacred in battle after battle. Many were following the example of high-profile, high-ranking Republic officers that jumped ships, the likes of Mon Halan, General Dered, and Admiral Karath. It's the last one that we're going to be looking at next, Admiral Saul Karath, the Butcher of Telos and Taurus. Saul Karath came from humble beginnings on Corellia, working double shifts at a munitions factory as a teenager to support his younger siblings when his father was away. When his father, who was a soldier in the Republic military, was killed in the Battle of Forerost during the Great Sith War, Saul enlisted in the Republic Navy to follow in his father's footsteps, despite technically being too young to do so. During the Great Sith War and the years that followed, Karath served in virtually every position the Navy had to offer, ultimately becoming a fighter pilot and a commissioned officer. He eventually was promoted to captain and given command of his own ship, the frigate Reciprocity. Before the Mandalorians began threatening the Republic, he made a name for himself battling pirates on the borders of Republic space. Captain Karath became known in the Navy for his quick decision-making, his boldness, and his strong command style. The Admiralty held him in high esteem. In those days, Karath had a strong love for the Republic Navy, which he considered his family. During the Mandalorian Wars, Saul Karath rose from the rank of captain to the rank of rear admiral, becoming one of the most renowned flag officers in the Republic Navy. He fought at Vanquo, Sirocco, and Ithor, surviving some of the Republic's most brutal defeats and securing some of its most hard-fought victories. He commanded several ships, including the battlecruiser Courageous, which was destroyed at Sirocco, the frigate Swiftsure, and, during the later stages of the war, the interdictor cruiser Leviathan. Karath and his protege, the young pilot Carth Onasi, became heroes in the Republic Navy, and during the later stages of the war, they served under Revan and Malak. Unlike many of those who served under Revan, however, Admiral Karath didn't follow the rogue Jedi into the unknown regions, and after the end of the war, when they returned at the head of a Sith invasion fleet, sparking the Jedi Civil War, Karath initially remained on the side of the Republic, but he didn't stay there for long. In the first weeks of the war, large portions of the Republic Navy defected and joined the Sith, bringing most of the Navy's larger capital ships with them. With the Republic weakened from the Mandalorian Wars, the Sith had the advantage, and Admiral Karath came to feel that the Republic was doomed, a sinking ship that wasn't worth defending anymore. Part of him believed that Revan and Malak, the heroes of the Mandalorian Wars, deserved to rule the galaxy more than the corrupt, ailing Senate. The other part of him just wanted to survive. He had clawed his way up from poverty on Corellia to one of the most prestigious commands in the Navy, and he was unwilling to let the Republic's collapse rob him of everything he had worked for. He wanted, above all, to keep the command and rank he had done so much to get, and that meant choosing the winning side. As a result, not only did Saul Karath betray the Republic and join the Sith Empire, he gave the Sith codes they used to bypass Republic perimeter scanners, allowing Sith forces to carry out a sneak attack on a key Republic shipyard near Telos 4 and wipe out half of the Republic Navy's docked ships. This brought Karath a high-ranking position within the Sith Armada, but the Sith Lord still had one final test for him to prove his loyalty. On their command, Admiral Karath led his fleet to Telos and demanded its surrender to the Sith Empire, and when the Telosians refused, he was ordered to bombard the planet from orbit and cleanse it of life. In the ensuing bombardment, Karath's fleet destroyed every city and Republic military installation on the surface of Telos, devastating the planet's environment and killing millions, including the family of his former friend, Carth Onasi. By the time a Republic task force arrived to intervene, Admiral Karath and his fleet were gone, and the surface of Telos had been rendered uninhabitable, and the only survivors were those aboard evac shuttles that had managed to flee the planet, who Karath had allowed to live so that they could tell the story of Telos' destruction to the galaxy. Following this atrocity, Admiral Karath became feared as one of the Sith's most ruthless officers, and Darth Revan made him the supreme commander of the entire Sith Armada. Karath's defection inspired numerous others to follow his example. Many in the Republic Navy had looked up to Admiral Karath, while others were unwilling to fight an enemy who had such a comprehensive knowledge of the Republic Navy's tactics and protocols. Thousands followed him in joining the Sith, and many brought ships with them, among them the Leviathan, Admiral Karath's flagship, which became the flagship of the entire Sith fleet. Karath became one of the Sith Empire's best tacticians, second only to Revan himself, infamous for getting numerous strategically important planets to surrender to the Sith by threatening to make them into a mirror of Telos. Carth Onasi claimed that Karath's strategic genius and commandability were half the reason the Sith did so well in the Jedi Civil War. When Revan was apparently killed in 3957 BBY and Darth Malak became Darth Lord of the Sith, he moved his flag to the Leviathan, often calling on Admiral Karath for his most important missions. As Malak was much less skilled at strategy than Revan had been, Admiral Karath played a much bigger role in directing the Sith Armada under Malak, becoming an even more important part of the Sith war effort. Malak assigned Admiral Karath to lead the blockade of Taris after the Jedi hero, Bastila Shan, crash-landed on the planet, and he later ordered Karath to destroy the entire surface of the planet to prevent Bastila from escaping. Admiral Karath objected at first, as Taris was a Sith-controlled planet home to billions of people with a large garrison of Sith troops on its surface, but he ultimately obeyed, and his fleet did to Taris what it had done to Telos. The entirety of Taris' planet-wide city was destroyed, its whole population of billions of people was wiped out, and many Sith personnel were killed by their own fleet in the process. The destruction of Taris horrified the galaxy even more than the destruction of Telos had, and it made Admiral Karath all the more reviled. The destruction of Taris also failed in its primary objective. Bastila escaped the planet just as the bombardment began. Admiral Karath assisted Lord Malak in hunting her down, hiring the bounty hunter Kalo Nord to kill Bastila and her companions. After Nord failed, Karath began hunting Bastila himself, and he was ultimately able to capture Bastila and her allies as they departed Manaan, bringing them aboard the Leviathan for interrogation. But Bastila and her allies escaped from the Leviathan's detention block, and Bastila, together with Cartho Nasi and the redeemed Revan, fought their way to the ship's bridge. In the ensuing battle, Saul Karath was struck down by Cartho Nasi, whose wife he had killed at Telos 4 and whose trust he had betrayed when he joined the Sith. Of the many beings that betrayed the Republic over the course of its history, Admiral Karath was one of the worst. After decades of serving in the Republic Navy, he turned on the Republic when it needed him the most, partly for self-serving reasons, and he carried out unspeakable atrocities in service of the Sith Empire, becoming cruel and openly sadistic in the process. Saul Karath didn't just betray his oath to the Republic, he betrayed everything he once stood for, massacring the innocent civilians he had once been trusted to protect. Our next Sith defector was a little more sympathetic, even if his mustache is an unforgivable crime against our eyes. This defector's name was Harun Tavis, and during the Cold War between the Republic and the True Sith Empire, he was a Republic trooper. During the Great Galactic War, he had served in many battles against the Sith, rising from the rank of lieutenant to that of commander, and during the Cold War, he replaced the recently promoted Jace Malcolm as the leader of Havoc Squad, one of the Republic Special Forces Division's most elite units. During the Cold War, he and his troops served the Republic with distinction, participating in covert action against the Sith all across the galaxy. But things went sideways for Havoc Squad on a mission to Ando Prime, where they had been sent by General Garza to disrupt Sith operations. On Ando Prime, Havoc Squad was pinned down and requested reinforcements, but they received none. The general who had ordered them to Ando Prime had done so without Senate approval, and the Senate deemed the mission on Ando Prime illegal and refused to reinforce it. Havoc Squad was left to die. They survived and eventually made it back to Republic space, but their experience of being abandoned by the Senate left Tavis and his subordinates with a sour taste in their mouths, which drove them to betray the Republic for the Sith Empire. Tavis was the ringleader of this conspiracy, and he had convinced the other members of the squad that joining the Sith was a better option than, say, deserting. Tavis and Havoc Squad jumped ship during a mission to Ord Mantell, stealing a prototype bomb to bring with them as proof of their value to the Sith. Their defection inspired hundreds of other operatives in the Republic Special Forces to turn traitor as well. The sole member of Havoc Squad that didn't defect, a new recruit who the others had left to die on Ord Mantell, became the leader of a new Havoc Squad, who General Garza dispatched to hunt down Tavis and the other defectors. After the new Havocs took out several of his comrades, Tavis sent in the Sith Empire's most elite assassins, the Shadow Fist, to destroy his replacements. The Shadow Fist failed, however, and Havoc Squad kept hunting Tavis and the others. The new Havoc Squad ultimately caught up with Tevis aboard the Sith cruiser Justice, where the renegade trooper was defeated and captured. Rather than face a Republic court-martial, he chose to die in battle with the new leader of Havoc Squad, dying as the last of his original unit. Harren Tavis wasn't the most righteous of traitors, but his motivations are certainly sympathetic. The Republic betrayed him first, after all, or to be more specific, General Garza sent them off to die, and the Senate did what it had to prevent war from breaking out again. All the same, you still can't blame Tavis and the rest of Havoc Squad for having it in for the Republic after that. Choosing to join the Sith is a more questionable choice, however, because they could have just deserted instead. For our next traitor, we're going to fast forward a few thousand years to the time of the Clone Wars. The Republic military that fought in the Clone Wars was much different from the Republic military of the Old Republic era. It was primarily, though not exclusively, composed of clones purpose-bred for war and indoctrinated from birth to serve the Republic. As a consequence of this, traitors and defectors were much less common in the ranks of the Grand Army of the Republic than they had been in prior iterations of the Republic Army, but they weren't unheard of. We've discussed a number of clone traitors in the past, and we're sure you're familiar with some of them, especially Sergeant Slick, who did nothing wrong. To round off this video though, we're going to be discussing two particularly interesting clone traitors, beginning with the ARC trooper known as Spar. Spar, also known by his designation Alpha 02, was an Alpha class ARC trooper, one of a batch of 100 elite soldiers that were essentially pure clones of Jango Fett, fully independent and meant to be the ultimate soldiers. The Alphas were the absolute best the Republic military had to offer, and though they could be rough around the edges and sometimes objected to their superiors' orders, they were all loyal to the Republic and served it with distinction. All of them except Alpha 02. Alpha 02 was the sole aberrant clone among the Alphas. He was completely unresponsive to indoctrination, making him even more independent than the other ARC troopers, and he had other behavioral anomalies as well. Hoping these abnormalities would just go away, the Kaminoans put Alpha 2 through reconditioning, and at first, it seemed the reconditioning was successful. But this was all a ruse on Spar's part. He knew what would happen to him if the Kaminoans determined he was defective, and he began faking indoctrination in order to blend in with the other clones. His ploy worked until, in 24 BBY, Spar overheard a conversation about one of Jango Fett's exploits, and it triggered a rush of memories. As it turned out, Spar wasn't just independent and unresponsive to indoctrination, he had all of Jango Fett's memories too. Upon realizing this, Spar knew he had to get off Kamino. He made a deal with one of the Mandalorian trainers working at Tipoca City, a doctor by the name of Mij Gillamar, who convinced Jango Fett to smuggle Spar off Kamino as a favor when he left for his next bounty hunt. Fett dropped Spar off at a spaceport in some Outer Rim backwater, and the Rogue Ark became the Clone Army's first deserter. During the Clone Wars, however, Spar became much more. After Jango Fett was killed in the first Battle of Geonosis, Spar became convinced that he had Fett's memories for a reason. He was destined to restore the Mandalorians to greatness. Fett, after all, had been the last of the true Mandalorians, and with his death, Spar was the only one who remembered the true Mandalorians and their ways, the only one who could resurrect them and restore the Mandalorians to glory. With the help of the Mandalorians and Fen Shaisa and Toby Dalla, Spar claimed to be the son of Jango Fett and thus the rightful claimant to the title of Mandalore, taking the name Mandalore the Resurrector. Hundreds of followers rallied to his banners, calling themselves the Mandalorian Protectors, and after the death of Duchess Satine Kryze and the destruction of the new Mandalorian faction in 20 BBY, the Protectors seized control of most of Mandalorian space. As the self-proclaimed heirs of Mandalore, Spar and the Protectors then decided to join the Clone Wars, on the side of the Separatists. Thus, Spar went from being a deserter to being a traitor. His reasons for this were simple. Jango Fett had bad memories of the Jedi after they massacred the true Mandalorians at Galadron, and Spar had those memories too, which compelled him to seek revenge against the Jedi. He and his Mandalorian protectors fought numerous battles against Republic forces in the later stage of the Clone Wars, slaughtering thousands of Spar's clone brothers and earning the hatred of the GAR in the process. The Mandalorian protectors acted as elite shock troopers for the CIS, carrying out covert missions and devastating lightning strikes on Republic forces across the galaxy. They didn't always win their battles, but they were never really trying to. Their objective was to do as much damage as possible and kill as many Jedi and clones as they could, and they did their job well. Indeed, they did their job so well that Darth Sidious started to consider them a destabilizing force, and in 19 BBY, he sent the Mandalorian protectors into a trap at Norval 2. There, the Mandalorians were ambushed by Republic forces, and the protectors were all but completely wiped out, with only Spar, Fen Shaisa, and Toby Dalla surviving. Spar fell apart after Norval 2, giving up the title of Mandalore and eventually leaving Mandalore to wander the galaxy. As he did, he steadily succumbed to clone madness, a form of psychosis that, in Spar's case, was caused by him having two sets of memories. This condition was severely worsened by Spar's PTSD from Norval 2, and by the time he was finally killed by Aelin Vel many years after the end of the Clone Wars, Spar had suffered a complete psychotic break. Spar wasn't your usual clone traitor. He was driven to fight against the Republic, not because of how they kept the clones enslaved, but because he had someone else's memories of the Battle of Galladron, which radicalized him against the Jedi. Spar doesn't seem to have ever cared about his fellow clones, and he certainly never had any loyalty to the Republic. He was loyal only to the memory of the true Mandalorians, a memory that wasn't even his. Spar was a troubled guy, and in that respect, he is a somewhat sympathetic traitor. Lastly, we're going to talk about two final Clone Wars era traitors, one clone and one non-clone collaborator. These were the clone trooper Ghost and Commander Kishpaugh, who attempted to defect to the CIS during the early months of the war. Ghost was an ordinary clone trooper, one of the oldest clones in the army. He first saw combat at the start of the war, and he was on the front lines pretty much non-stop from that point forward. Ghost was a veteran, and a skilled one at that, a highly effective soldier who was good at surviving. Kishpaugh, meanwhile, was a non-clone officer in the GAR. Originally, he'd been part of his local planetary security forces reserves and had never been meant to leave his homeworld, but at the start of the war, he was transferred into the GAR as an officer. These two men came from completely different backgrounds, but in late 22 BBY, they joined forces in pursuit of a common goal, getting the heck out of the Republic military. Ghost had fought in many battles, had survived when many of his brothers had died, and his experiences in the Clone Wars had left him jaded against the Republic, and, more importantly, determined to survive no matter the cost. He recognized that he was a slave of the Republic, bred to throw his life away in a pointless war for galactic domination, and the more averse to throwing his life away he became, the more he resented the Republic for sending him to the front lines in the first place. Kishpaugh, on the other hand, had never had a stake in the Clone Wars. He had joined the PSFs to support his family and never thought he'd ever be transferred off-world. When he was, he found he wasn't allowed to leave the service. Kishpaugh wanted nothing more than to see his home again and be done with the war. He had no loyalty to the Republic, and he couldn't have cared less whether it won or lost. Ghost and Kishpaugh began looking for a way to escape the service, and they ultimately contacted the CIS to get their help in doing so. The Separatists promised that they would help them escape the Republic war effort and provide protection against Republic reprisals if the two traitors helped them capture the planet Osnek, which would help them wrest the whole Kadamimu sector from Republic control. The two men agreed. Commander Kishpaugh arranged a Republic mission to Osnek, ostensibly to investigate a secret Separatist droid factory on the planet, but actually to destroy a power plant belonging to the locals, which would turn Osnek's people against the Republic and ensure their secession. Kishpaugh sent Ghost and his squad to do the job, trusting the veteran clone to terminate his squad mates and blow up the power plant, following which Kishpaugh planned to pick Ghost up in his personal shuttle and flee to Separatist space. The plot would have worked were it not for Sergeant Banks, a new member of Ghost's squad who saved the power plant at the last minute, killed Ghost, and then arrested Kishpaugh for treason. Ghost was fairly representative as far as clone traitors went. He recognized that he was a slave of the Republic, hated the Republic for it, and did whatever the Separatists said he had to secure his freedom, even if it meant killing his squad mates and destroying an innocent population's power plant. Kishpaugh, meanwhile, was an example of a kind of Republic traitor that we see much less often. A member of a local force that got in over his head and just wanted out, no matter the cost. We can't blame Ghost for wanting to be free, nor can we blame Kishpaugh for wanting to go home. We'd even argue that Ghost's betrayal and killing of his squad mates was just an act of war, as legitimate as many of the other things the GAR did. Their case is made less sympathetic, however, by the fact that they were willing to destroy a developing planet's energy infrastructure for their own selfish reasons, so Ghost and Kishpaugh end up looking more morally grey on the whole. But that's our look at 7 beings who betrayed the Republic for one reason or another. But what do you think? What's your favourite Republic betrayal story? These were all pretty interesting ones, so we hope you've enjoyed and can let us know in the comment section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Before we wrap up, a huge thank you to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Don't miss out. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to download the game now. Use the code HelloJAN to unlock 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstones, but act fast. This exclusive offer is only available until February 1st. Build your team, strategize, and jump into the action today.